Hello all and welcome. And I am the practical philosopher, also sometimes known as the MGTOW philosopher. Today I'd like to talk about feminism, the scourge of humanity. I say humanity because it's not only a scourge to men, but a scourge to women as well. They just simply don't know it because they've been brainwashed by several generations of this nonsense, going back to the 19th century, so quite a bit more than several generations. Now, first of all, feminism didn't start out to be the cultural Marxist piece of garbage that it currently is. It just got co-opted and used for that purpose later on. It was a convenient tool, just like the people who promote it are convenient tools. Now, it started out as a women's suffrage movement. Women wanted more equality, more power, actually. They wanted more control of their lives, and they wanted the ability to do a lot of the things that men did. Now, of course, even back in the 19th century, women were delusional, misled, and highly misunderstood men's role in society because they were home all day. They didn't work real jobs. They didn't know what the hell a real job was about. And even today, women are slightly delusional, more than slightly, about the role that men hold in society. They don't seem to realize that if men were to disappear tomorrow, the world would fall apart. They really think they could build all the shit that's around them, make everything that they use, invent everything that they have. If they could, they would have. Okay? So, be happy you have men, ladies. Of course, they won't be because they are delusional. But back to how feminism first started. It was a women's suffrage movement. Women were suffering. Women didn't have the same rights as men. They couldn't own property, for example, and while it wasn't illegal for women to work, not too many people would hire them to do most professions. And although there were some things they were fit for, like being a nanny or something like that, the majority of them stayed home and took care of the kids and such. And of course, as time passed, women became more and more bold. They got more and more courage to go out and cause mischief. They pushed, and saw that, hey, they could push, so they pushed more and more, and before you knew it, they were doing radical shit like running around, bashing up bars, and, in Europe, destroying coffee shops and shit, because that's where men would gather, and what people might not know is that coffee inhibits one's libido, and men at home were not being quite as affectionate with their women after they went to the coffee shops, and the men were spending a lot of time in these new coffee shops in Europe too, and not spending as much time with their lovely wives. So the women, what did they do? They basically protested, and tried to lobby to get coffee shops shut down. Of course, in America, it was booze. Of course, this caused the same problems, but it also had women getting beat up by their husbands. So what did women do? They protested, and of course, after the women's suffrage movement first started, they pushed a little and saw that they had the ability to push. So some crazy older ladies in the movement grabbed axes and ran around destroying the insides of bars as well as the outsides. And nobody stopped them because, hey, you can't hit a woman, and these are women, they're all running around armed with axes. And then, of course, you had the later on wonderful idea of prohibition, which came about by women, first of all, getting the vote, and then there's so many women, the dumb white men in Congress thought it was a good idea to amend the Constitution and to prohibit alcohol so they could get the ladies' votes, and this caused a decade and more of intense crime throughout the country and lots of death. And this is what you get when women are trying to make policy in government. Decisions made based on emotion or subjectivism, and not decisions made using logic and reason, which would be using an objective point of view, which women clearly do not have, generally speaking. So that's how feminism started out. It started out as a women's suffrage movement, went on to get them the vote, and then women continued to push, because they saw that they could. America had become more and more liberal. Men had become more and more tolerant of their women's misbehavior. And before you know it, women are pushing the idea of equality with men and wanting to have the same rights as men and the same jobs as men. Not the stinky, terrible, crappy jobs, of course, because they don't want to do those jobs. You know, they want equality. They want to be the same as men, but they don't want to do everything men have to do. And that's feminism. Now, it basically morphed. It morphed in the 50s and early 60s into something else entirely. Okay? It became something different. It became, and eventually morphed into the third wave of feminism. You know, first wave was women's suffrage, to get women to be seen as, you know, somewhat equal to men, get them to vote so that they could influence policy. And that's what the second wave of feminism was about. The first wave was just to get some initial greater rights for women in society, the vote, and then, but that wasn't enough for women. They wanted more than just the vote and to have equal protection under the law. Oh no, they wanted to be men. Okay? They wanted to be men. I mean, you know, they're at home all day and, oh, I have all these babies I have to feed. I have to take care of them, change their diapers, and my job is so hard. And back then, it was a hard job being a woman. I will grant you that. Women in the 18th and early 19th century, they had a rough friggin' job. There was, you know, not much electricity. Almost nobody had electrical appliances anymore at all. And so women had to do everything by hand. I mean, they had to wash the clothes by hand. They had to do all the cooking. They had to stoke the oven. They had to, you know, have wood put in the oven. They had to get the right temperature for the oven. And all their cooking was done over on a wood stove. I mean, good God, talk about a hard job. If you've ever washed clothes by hand, I mean, especially dirty, grimy, grungy clothes, and I've tried it just to see how difficult it is. Woo, that is hard stuff. And imagine how grimy and dirty a co-worker's clothes would be. I mean, talk about difficult. And the women back then, many of them would make their own clothes. Some of these women would even spin their own cloth. I mean, it was a hard job being a woman back then, and I take my hat off to these women. I'm not saying that their job was any harder than a man's, but it was certainly almost as difficult. It was certainly a hard job, but it wasn't as hard, okay? I'm sorry, if you're in a mine swinging a pickaxe, digging out coal from underground and risking your life, yeah, your job's slightly harder than a woman hand washing somebody's pants. It's not to say she didn't have a hard job, though. Just comparatively speaking, it was really not a big comparison. But of course, compared to today's jobs, oh, women had it rough. And I take my hats off to them, especially considering how women today don't want to make a piece of toast, and, you know, it would kill them to make a sandwich, for God's sake, let alone cook something. So, you know, women back then had it rough. And I can understand why they would see men and think men had this cushy existence that they didn't have. What they failed to recognize, though, was that men earned this existence. They earned these extra rights that women didn't earn. Yeah, I'm sorry, ladies, but men worked harder and did more than you did. You just need to look around society. Everything was built by a man. And of course, a woman would say, oh, well, that's just because of patriarchy. And, you know, they got the jobs. If we'd had that opportunity, we'd have built the same stuff. Really? I mean, how much weight can you lift? How good is your hand-eye coordination? How good are your spatial skills? How good are you at constructing and deconstructing things? How good is your imagination? How good is your ability to think up and make detailed blueprints and do the mathematical engineering processes to figure out the different load-bearing weights and leverages of this and that? I mean, good Lord, the complexity of these things and the nature of these things specifically plays to a man's skills. If these things specifically played to women's skills, women would have been doing these things, okay? If it was found that women had these abilities, they would have been the ones doing them, not men. That's how the world works, okay? And then the world would have developed slightly differently with maybe women being on an equal playing field with men, or maybe even in a superior position, instead of where they ended up. Now, this is not to say that there was not some unfairness going on, but women claiming they were oppressed is nonsense. First of all, you ever hear the saying, power behind the throne? Well, in most households, the women were the power behind the throne. Yes, they played to the man's ego, but the women, they were in charge of finances, in charge of running the household. They were the boss at home. Now, yes, there were some instances of women being abused by men, and there were just as many instances of men being abused by their women. You know, I mean, and at least if a man beat his wife and it was bad enough, you know, he might be taken out into the town square and whipped, given 15, 20 lashes. A guy, if the community knew that his wife was abusing him, he would be strapped on the back of a donkey, turned backwards, tied to it, and, you know, ridden around town to be laughed at and ridiculed. They'd come to his house at night and bang pots and pans and shit and ridicule the guy. He would be publicly shamed if he was beaten by his wife, which is almost the same kind of thing he goes through now if anybody finds out. So they hide that type of stuff nowadays. Men are beaten just as much as their wives, and don't give me the bullshit about, yes, but men are bigger, so it's more atrocious when a man does it. It's more objectionable. Give me a break. I don't buy that size equaling greater force, so it's more of a crime bullshit. First of all, a woman can generate just as much force as a man, as women are more likely to grab weapons and use them. Hence all the stories about pots and pans. Those are not myths. That's very real. And women still do this today, or they throw shit. So women can equally be the equivalent of a man very easily in the terms of how much force they apply when abusing a man, which, like I said, studies have found time and time again that women are as or even more abusive nowadays because they know they can get away with it, because we now live in a matriarchy. So it's a total myth that women being abused was some kind of a one-sided instance where it was only happening to them and they were this oppressed class. Now, yes, they could not vote. Okay, let's address that. There's a reason for that. And that's this. Women are emotional. They act on their emotions. They don't use logic and reason like men do, generally speaking. They use their emotions to make decisions. And women, by their very nature, are collectivists, okay? They're socialist collectivists, because they rely on subjectivism, which is exactly what Marxism relies on. To be a socialist is to be a subjectivist. So women are natural socialists, which is the worst type of government you could possibly have. My God, it's the worst. And so men saw this, and they saw that women were irrational. And so, yeah, they didn't let them vote. Good. Just like you don't let children vote, because truthfully, let's be honest, and you might find this condescending, but the truth is the majority of women are like children, okay? It's the truth. When it comes to women, they have no accountability for their actions these days, no reason. You know, if you ever watch these videos online of women doing horrible things and the cops don't do anything and they just walk away, like that one with the 30-year-old Indian doctor who beat up the Uber driver, trashed the inside of his car, and then nothing happened to her. She paid for his broken cell phone, and that was it. Yeah, she lost her job after somebody, thank God, filmed the incident, but she didn't go to prison like she should have. If it had been a man that had done that, he'd have been in jail for years. So women are irrational. Women are immature. They are too emotional. So, yeah, they should not have gotten the vote. They shouldn't have had the vote, and they shouldn't have the vote now, because look at what they've turned the country into. So feminism being required to right this sort of inequity in control over who gets voted into office, I don't see it. Because guys back then had the right idea. Women should not be allowed to vote. But that was the start. It was like around the second wave of feminism coming in. And then second wave transitioned into third wave, which was supposed to be about women gaining the equal opportunities with men. In fact, this was like it's supposed to be the final stage. All opportunities, the same opportunities as men. But it changed. It changed because it got co-opted, especially after World War II. It got co-opted by the left. And the members of the Frankfurt School who had already deeply infiltrated America's universities, because socialism is very attractive to intellectuals and professors. They like the complexity of it. They like the language of it. They like the idea of leftism. And so they spread these ideas, and then they co-opted feminism, because feminism is rife with social ideas. I mean, feminism really is a leftist ideology, and they co-opted it and made it even more leftist, to the point where it wasn't about equality for women anymore. It was all about identity politics and grouping people. In the case of feminism specifically, but not really specific. At that time, when the third wave feminism came about, it was specifically about grouping men and then hating them, disenfranchising them, destroying them and their traditional role in society, because, you know, leftism, socialism is all about deconstructing, demoralizing, and then deconstructing the society. And it's all sorts of tools to do that. Black Lives Matter, the Antifa, these are all tools of these leftist intellectuals who want to destroy society and then remake it in their vision, which would be the perfect socialist vision. Yeah, that wasn't real socialism. You hear that all the time when talking about countries where it didn't work. But I know the real socialism. I know how to make it work. And you'll hear this all the time if you talk to these delusional nut jobs. And when you talk to a feminist, if you talk to her and decipher the language, everything she's saying is leftism, is cultural Marxism. It's just the labels are different, okay? But it's all about an oppressed class and an oppressor. And so that's all feminism really is. It's one of many tools to deconstruct society, demoralize society, and then deconstruct it so that the demagogues can come in, and they already are here, and reconstruct the society and put the people in power that they want. That's what feminism is. You have to understand that. And it might have started out with supposed noble goals, which were to liberate women and give them absolute freedom. But look what we've got now. Chaos. As I heard once in a movie, Ghostbusters, if I remember, mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together. Day is night, night is day. And just everything is turned upside down. Traditional roles have been destroyed. Feminism has been one of the better tools for accomplishing that. It has done a very good job of turning men into women, women into men, deconstructing. And this is what socialism does. This is what Marxism, cultural Marxism does. It comes in, it's introduced, and it's about redefining the traditional roles in society and then destroying those roles. For example, the nuclear family. Man was the head of the family. He went out, he worked, the woman stayed home, she raised the kids, she took care of the household and the finances and everything. And the kids listened to the parents. Now, the man, his traditional role, the man has been turned into almost like a woman. He doesn't feel good about being a man. He's not proud about being a man. He's not proud of being an American. Feminists have branded America as a horrible country. That's another thing. Destroy patriotism and any sense of nationalism at all, which, by the way, nationalism is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just bad when taken to extremes. You should have some nationalistic feelings about your country, meaning you admire, appreciate the culture that you live in. And of course, patriotism, loving your country, defending your country, wanting to protect the land you live on. And these things have been destroyed in the modern day male by feminism, the constant attacks on men to take away their power in society and give it to women who are inherently socialist in nature. So it's all about deconstructing society. Feminism is not a tool to elevate women to equality with men. It started that way, and it's now being used for another purpose. The equality bunk is just a guise. It's just a smokescreen for the real agenda, which is to destroy American culture, because you have to destroy the existing culture before you can reconstruct it and change it into a new culture. The one that the intellectuals think they can make work. And this is some very scary stuff, and you have to understand this about feminism. Now, of course, feminism has still been used to elevate women, because they're the ones that are going to do what the people pulling the strings want them to do, the globalists, the people really in charge, like the George Soroses of the world, okay? And so, in the process of third wave feminism acting, basically in their belief, most of these people who advocate feminism are just useful fools. They don't know the real agenda and goals of the movement that they have attached themselves to. So through their actions, women have actually become superior to men, and the society has become a matriarchal one. But that's just a means to an end. That's a more incidental than it is primary goal. But it's convenient, and it's good for the people who are advancing the globalist agenda, who want to fracture and destroy society by attacking its traditions and the culture itself and redefining everything, including words, that women, who are the most emotional and easily manipulated and the easiest to be social conformists and to form social collective, that's wonderful that they are now in power. But that's not the end goal. That's just a convenient happenstance. And yes, that was part of it, but I don't think that was the intention initially. The real intention, first of all, was, now this was sold to the government, mind you. What you might not know is that the third wave feminism movement, the second wave feminism movement, like 2.5 feminism, the second moving into the third wave feminism movement, was funded by the CIA. Those first books written, you need to do some research on CIA funding feminists. Some of the first second to third wave books written on feminism were funded by the CIA, because the government had some specific goals, and the globalists essentially went to them and said, hey, we want this, that, this, and it's going to benefit you in this, that, and this way. And the benefits for the government of feminism are very clear. Because you see, in the 1950s, early 1960s, most women were housewives. And so only half of the population was working. And so the tax revenue was not enough. So the globalists said, hey, we need more, we go to the government, we can get them involved in pushing our agenda and speed things up even faster by having the government do some of the heavy lifting for us. So they went to the government and said, hey, it's not enough people working. We need more people in the workforce paying taxes, all right? So what we need to do is break up the family. So let's fund this movement and make it a real movement now, instead of this fringe thing, where women will get more power and be convinced that being a housewife is a bad thing, and being married and tied to a man isn't necessarily such a great thing either. And we will double the people working, and then we'll double our tax revenues. And of course, if you say to the government, who loves to waste money, we're going to double your tax revenues, they'll be like, hey, that's a good idea. Well, but they couldn't be so overt about it, and that's why they used the CIA. So you folks really need to do some research on this stuff. And you'll find out that I'm right about all of this, and it's easy to access this information if you just do a little research. So feminism, in its earlier stage, while a noble cause, was misguided. Was a misguided cause, misguided by women who thought men had something they did not, when they really didn't have enough experience with the man's lifestyle and how he comported himself outside of the home to understand that they weren't missing out on anything. They weren't missing out on anything. he's digging coal out of a coal mine. He's shortening his life by 30 years, sucking down all those all that coal dust. Or he could get drafted into World War I or World War II and go die in war. I mean, you ladies out there, especially the ones back then, thought that it was some great, wonderful thing to be a man. But we had it rougher than you did, ladies. You had it easier than we did. You were the ones being treated. You have always been treated special. That's why the man is called the protector of the household. He protected you. You had a very special place. You were the only one that could make the babies. You were the only one that could raise the babies because you made the breast milk. You were supposedly better at raising kids, which we now know isn't true. Research has shown that men make better parents. Do a little research and you'll find that out. But, so this is what feminism came from. A woman's misunderstanding and feeling that she was suffering under some kind of yoke of male oppression. And actually, the people that stirred this up were, old, unhappy, bitter women who had either never been married or it sounds familiar, like today's feminists, or who had been abused and mistreated by their husbands and, felt that all marriages must be like this, so they have to free women. And they convinced a lot of dopey younger women who were very easily convinced to join groups because they're natural collectivists, to join into their cause and promote this liberation of women, which they didn't really need to be liberated in the first place. They had everything just fine, but they didn't realize that. And that's why it stagnated for quite a while. And women were quite happy in the 50s. And then came along the next wave of feminism, and it got funded by the government to break up the family. And that wasn't the only reason to create more tax revenue. It was to give the state more power. Because if you can break up households and weaken the hold that the parents have on the children, then you empower the state. You give the state more control. You give them more power over your kids. And over you, of course, because you're breaking the connections in families. In the past, especially in the 19th century, families were their own governments in a way. The household was the country. The father was the president. The mother was the real president, actually behind the throne pulling the strings. And their word was law. And they raised their kids and taught them values. It was very difficult for outsiders to influence the kids. But if you break that family dynamic apart, if you separate the parents, you weaken them, and you weaken their influence on their kids. And now the state can come in through public schools and re-educate those kids and indoctrinate them. So feminism has probably been one of the most powerful tools of the left, of the socialists, from the Frankfurt School to deconstruct society, demoralize society, and reconstruct it in their own vision of the utopian world. So feminism, for a very long time, has been nothing more than a tool of the left to destroy America and remake it into a socialist country. Which is why you never hear university professors or anybody else in government talking about the evils of leftism, of communism, but you always hear them talking about the evils of Nazism. Because one thing that Nazi Germany was nationalistic. And nationalism is one of the more, patriotism and nationalism are two of the tools that can fight socialism and collectivism and indoctrination into this collective hive mind. Because you have a connection to a specific identity that represents a country, and it's very hard to break that down. And you have to do it on an individual level. It's very hard to do that. But if you can make those qualities of nationalism and patriotism evil things, well then, you have a much easier time, because people won't want to be those things, and they won't develop this love of country and this personal connection to the ideals that represent that country. And that's why many Americans and many people throughout the world have this idea in their head that America has no culture. that it's just this hodgepodge of people from all these different places. When in truth, America does have a strong and rich culture, or at least it used to, until cultural deconstructivism was enacted by the left some time ago, and feminism has been their most successful tool in deconstructing and demoralizing American society. So feminism is altogether evil. While you might think it served a purpose at some time, no, not really. I'm sorry. You might disagree with my viewpoints on women being able to vote, and look what it's done to the country. But it has not been about anything noble for a very long time. For the past at least 50 years, it's only been about deconstructing and demoralizing the society, branding maleness, which really encompasses critical thinking, logic, and reason. And so it's about branding those qualities. Masculinity itself is evil because those are the qualities that can combat them. And venerating the qualities that represent women, which are subjectivity, empathy, and emotionally based decision making. That's why our schools have adopted a largely female focused, oriented way of teaching, and why they have totally, completely demonized the boy and the man. You know, that's why they got so many kids on Ritalin. To stunt the growth of their brain, to stop them from fully developing, to inhibit them expressing male characteristics, and to control them and make them just like women. ADHD, there's no such thing. It's called being a boy. It's called being a man. It's probably one of the biggest scams in history, okay, is the feminist movement. And it has infiltrated every single part of society, right down to your public elementary school. Leftism is everywhere. It went from the Frankfurt School showing up at Columbia University and starting to spread its tentacle out from there back in the early 19th century. And it spread throughout academia. And now every teacher who teaches has been indoctrinated into that leftist system because it's in every university out there. And so they're all leftists. It's been all about re-educating kids and breaking down the American family so that they have no influence over those children. So avoid feminism at all costs. Preach the evilness of it to anyone who will listen, and avoid anyone that shows indications of being indoctrinated into this philosophy, and fight against it as much as you can. Stop being silent. Stop being the meek conservative who won't hit back when somebody calls you a racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, whatever, bigot. You need to fight back with the same kind of weapons they're using against you. You cannot be meek and passive anymore. You cannot sit on your ass anymore at home saying, oh, well, I'd like to go out there and protest or fight these people, but I got better things to do, like sleep, because I have to work the next day. That doesn't cut it anymore. That does not cut it. You need to get out there and be patriotic. You need to embrace some nationalism, okay? You need to embrace some type of nationalistic identity, all right, that is connected to your country. You can't just be this passive, meek mass sitting at home watching the news while these leftists run around scaring the shit out of everybody that isn't one of them, so that nobody stands up to them and they continue to take over the country. I mean, they've pretty much succeeded now. We can still beat them, but you folks out there have to recognize the threat and stop sitting on the sidelines. And it's going to require actual fighting, just like you had at Berkeley, where the leftists got their asses kicked for the first time ever in recent history, because some conservatives who got fed up with them went out there to support each other in numbers and beat the shit out of these bunch of socialist, leftist, brainwashed, indoctrinated, useful fools. And you're going to have to join them in numbers. And only then, because these people are the real bullies, only then can we take back our culture and be proud to be Americans and not have to listen to these idiots saying that America is the worst country in the world and it was never great. Okay? It's a great country. It's the greatest country in the fucking world. And if you don't embrace that, if you don't go out there and fight these people who, they say whatever they want, but they attack anyone who doesn't agree with them. They have scared the whole entire country. It's time for you to stop being passive. You have to become aggressive, and you have to fight them. You have to fight them with words, and you have to fight them with fists if it's necessary, meaning if they resort to that, and they will, because they always do. You have a 100% chance of violence if a group of leftists shows up and you say something they don't want to hear. So stop being afraid. There's more of you than there are of them. The only reason you haven't been able to get together until now is because leftist socialists are cowards. They're collectivists. So it's very easy for them to form into groups, while conservatives and people that value American culture and American ideals and freedom are generally individualists. So they look at things and approach things from an individual point of view. Well, you're at a disadvantage in this case because there's then going to be more of them in any given circumstance than there is of you. So come together, become a collective of individuals, not of brain-dead zombies who all believe the same goddamn thing, and they think that feelings equate to physical violence, so you've hurt their feelings, so it's okay for them to use violence against you. You've got to fight back against that, and you've got to fight back against feminism. Men out there, you need to stop being such pathetic, white knight pussies trying to service women who hate men, because that's what feminism has become. That was the entirety of the goal. That was the point. Man hate. Becoming a man is bad. Adopt a feminine ideology. Adopt a feminine mindset. That's why this transsexual bullshit has become so popular. That's why you have more and more men adopting this transsexual identity, because they hate their masculinity. They have been taught by the media, by everybody, that being male is bad and that woman is good. So through some kind of internalized shame, they have adopted a female persona. And it's just going to continue to get worse until we men, we conservatives, and some of them can be women, thank God, fight back against this crazy shit. Because it's not going to end. These people do not see logic. They do not see reason. They will not stop until someone stops them. And it's going to require probably civil war. It's going to require rioting in the streets. It's going to require every time one of these groups shows up outside to protest somebody, you conservatives have to form your own group and go out there and confront them. And then there has to be a fight, because it's the only thing they understand, and they will attack you. And you can't run away, and you have to defeat them. This happened all over America, and it'll be a war. I guarantee you it will be a war, a civil war. And I don't know how much the cops will do, because in most cases they just let the leftists do whatever they want. But they'll take you away and arrest you if you fight back and defend yourself. But that's okay. You're in the right. You need to get out there. You need to fight back. You need to be a patriot. Because that's what this country needs right now. Patriots. I am the practical philosopher, sometimes known as the MGTOW philosopher. And I wish you a good day and hope you will be patriots. Take care.